Hey folks, welcome to podcast commentary for episode 109. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't heard the episode, you should do so on susantaylor.org or wherever you get your podcast. This is a commentary and discussion on Susan's podcast episode 109, How to Empower a Successful Life, The Secrets of a Yoga Scientist. So to start off with, Susan, I really love the title. I think we already discussed this, but the subtitle really pulled me in, The Secrets of a Yoga Scientist.
Yeah, coming up with that title, I really started out with how to empower a successful life. And I know you and I talked about it, and you said, oh no, I like the secrets of yoga scientists to go first, how to empower a successful life. And as my mind usually flips things anyway, we know that. But I originally started out, and some people have heard me say in other commentaries, when I write what I want to talk about, and I really wanted to talk about a successful life. And what had happened was all the stuff I was putting in there for what is a successful life. I said, gee, that's what I learned in yoga sciences. And I'm a yoga scientist. I said, that's what I learned as being a scientist, how you know, what I always remember, uh, what I was taught is, yoga scientists do their work in a laboratory, just like, or I sometimes say laboratory, whatever accent. But a scientist, I am a scientist. I did, my work in a lab. And all the yoga that I did was the same lab, but the lab was using my own body, breath, mind, and spirit. And that's what the great sages, the gurus, that's what they do. They're yoga scientists because you don't have to go out and learn anything. Nothing's on the outside. You see, it's all on the inside. And a successful life is really about accessing the inside. And what is that? The breath, mind, and spirit, body, breath, mind, and spirit. And so, there's the observer, the process of observing, and the object of observation. And that's being a scientist. That's our meditation, right? We talked previously on a podcast about, I think it was like 108, when I talked about meditation and how, you're the observer. Then there's the process of observing, which is the mind, and then the object of observation. So when you start seeing those different things, when we're established in being, we're the observer. When we know who we are, we're not the body, we're not the breath, we're not the mind, but we're the observer of that. And that's what's so amazing. So yes, that's how we have to become a successful or have a successful life. And the secrets of a yoga scientist are, I use the word secrets because I don't think it's readily available as much as I've been exposed to it. And I just came up, it's a secret, like, oh yeah, I didn't realize. So that's how it happened.
Right. Yeah, I love it. So let's backtrack a little and talk about yoga science. So I know in the podcast you mentioned about what people typically associate yoga and yoga science with, or they might not even hear the word science, they just hear yoga and the physical aspects of it.
Well, yoga yoga science, as yeah, you're totally on target with that. Yoga is a science because it deals with the body, breath, mind, and soul, and ultimately the universe. The universe itself, as I've always said, I've actually said that. And it has both practical application and theoretical. What's happened is and we do this in our culture right now, in the world, we take one little part of it, let's say in the Raja Yoga, we're just taking one part of it called asana, which is posture. And that's really developed to develop a seat in meditation. That's really what it's for, because meditation is the ultimate to be able to attend to the workings of your mind, your spirit, and go beyond that. And to know who you are. And so with yoga science, because we're dealing not just with doing exercise, but we're working with the body, the breath, the mind, and the soul, the spiritual aspect, it becomes a science because it doesn't try to teach. People think yoga science, oh, it's going to affect my religion. No, no, it doesn't have anything to do with religion. It doesn't tell you what to do, what not to do, but it teaches you how to be. It establishes you in your own being. You become, and you become by doing the experimentation, being the observer, watching the object of observation and the object itself on your own self, on your own body, breath, and mind. And that's why the hidden secret is really within yourself. It's not on the outside. So it really helps you know the known and unknown parts of life. And that's why we call it yoga science. And the real purpose of it is so that we can live in pure happiness. We overcome our pains and miseries. But yoga science does offer like a scientific experiment. When I used to do my experimentation, my what we called assays, yoga science offers a methodology for that. You can understand yourself on all levels. And it's the methodology, is that systematic, skillful approach that I talk about in our master class for meditation. That's what really enables that to take place. Yeah. So it's a way of improving yourself and understanding your internal states. So that's really what it's about in the title.
Absolutely. I definitely consider myself a yoga scientist as well, aspiring student, or as you say, we're all really students in that way.
Yes, of course we are. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next topic, you basically talk about being a scientist, so what is a scientist? And more specifically, of course, what is a yoga scientist?
Well, let's first look at the word science of really what is a scientist. People are afraid of the word science, but we're doing science every day, even when we make our meals. It's a science experiment. It's mixing. And we do scientific experiments within our own body without even knowing when our food digests. So the scientist, though, is the person, the way I'm defining it, is a person who is researching inquiry. And they have an expert level of knowledge in the field of science. I don't believe you become an expert in 10,000 hours, which people say. I think it's about 12 years, maybe, if you're practicing 40 hours a week to become an expert. So, but it's that constant researching of what we're doing. And science is the application of these systematic processes like observation, experimentation. So we would go out in the world and try something. We know that if we breathe really fast, we're going to get dizzy. That's an experiment right there. We're watching our breath and we're saying, wow, if I breathe with jerks and pauses, I'm going to be more anxious than if I'm breathing calmly with no jerks or pauses with a smooth fashion. That's an experiment. Or another experiment would be, wow, if I just jump out of bed without just doing a little bit of awareness training or stretching or diaphragmatic breathing, I'm going to have a different situation when I jump out than when I don't. They're all experimentations. The best ones are done with food. They're the easiest ones, and I call it food sadhana, where we're using it as our own meditation practice. So if you're going to eat, I haven't had, by the way, ice cream in a few months. I'm not doing cold, and you know how much I love chocolate chip ice cream. So my experimentation over the last couple of months was avoid that and see what happens. Well, I'm not having digestive problems. My sensory mind, my habit mind wants to say, oh, just every time I go in shopping and I see those chocolate ice cream sandwiches, it brings back memories even into childhood. They were my favorite. And it's an observation. That's my point. That's an experiment. The experimentation comes from the observation and your ability to observe yourself.
Wow.
And how you think and how you be. So we're all scientists. We're all researchers, some more, some less. Even when we ignore, if you're aware of your ignoring the factor, you're a scientist. So that's where I'm coming from with that. You study, observe, and research the makings of you, of who you are, and how you think and how you behave. And people are more and more, the veil, as I say, is lifting. People are more and more aware of their own behaviors now, their own happiness, their own sadness, their own anger, animosity, jealousy, what is the word that they use? Left out. What is that word when people feel left out?
FOMO.
FOMO. People are aware of that FOMO, fear of missing out. That's an awareness. That's an experiment. So now when you feel that FOMO come on, you can go back and say, wait, that's mine. That's not who I am. Let me just experiment by not going and checking. Let me just let it be. So that's an experiment.
Sure. Yeah, well, as soon as you mentioned ice cream, my monkey mind started to take over. I'm like, oh, because I don't like all the ingredients that they put in the ice creams at the store. So I like to make my own. So I get the organic cream, and we have a recipe that I call very cherry. So it's a cream with cherries in it and chocolate chips. My wife Lynn really loves the chocolate chips in there, but it's
So do
so
I.
good.
Wait, wait, wait. I had no idea that you had, after all these years, I had no idea that you were into ice cream. So you have to tell me the ice cream maker that you use,
Uh,
because that might be my new thing. I
uh,
used to make it in my 20s. I used to make ice cream and I used to churn it by hand. And I would shave the dark chocolate. Remember, I think it was, I don't remember the name. Oh, I forget it. They used to do mix-ins, ice cream.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It started, I think, in Somerville, Massachusetts, where you used to get the mix-ins. And oh, what a brilliant idea that was.
So
But
maybe for later we'll have a separate playlist with all the recipes and all that fun stuff. So
for ice cream, right?
yeah,
Let's not get
exactly.
started on that.
The experiment. So talking about the laboratory, and I like laboratory. If I use my evil voice, then I say laboratory. But in the laboratory for our
Yeah.
bodies, so the experimentation. So the first thing that came to mind is doing the experiments as you described. So, and I know you use journaling and other things. So as a yoga scientist, I know some people need to keep track of their experiments so that they know, what things to do or what things not to do. For example, what things to eat or not to eat, what makes me uncomfortable, that kind of thing. Can you talk a little bit about the lab and the lab work and keeping track of your
Well,
results?
yeah, I always had a lab notebook when I was doing research. In real research, meaning real, I mean, in the external world, getting my PhD, I had a lab notebook dated, and that's what our journal is. So, what we want to do is we want to start with one habit at a time. Like, you don't want to just do everything. So, for this week, I'm going to observe let's talk about meditation here. For this week, I'm going to record the time that I'm sitting, my physical body, is it comfortable? And see how many thoughts came up, let's say, for example. And then I'm going to record that. And I'm starting a practice with just doing one-to-one breathing, inhaling for 2 or 3, exhaling for 2 or 3 for 5 minutes. That becomes an experiment in and of itself. And you can do that for even 40 days. I always prefer 40 days. If you're going to choose food to experiment with, you can try, most people need to avoid a certain food if they know they have trouble with, see what that's like. Taking a food out of your diet that may not be useful for me, because I was with an acupuncturist, and some of our community actually commented and said, wow, where is he? But he had left, and I don't have his forwarding address, but he had said to me before he left, don't eat any, in broken English, of course, because he was from Korea, I believe. No cold food. He'd say no cold. And I said, I'm going to make a conscious effort not to have cold food. And that was in the beginning. I was in November sometime. And I knew that intellectually, of course, because I do nutrition, but I'm a human being too. And my sensory mind said, nah, just have one ice cream sandwich. And then one would lead to 2 to 3. And it's extremist. But it was fun. But my experiment was no on the cold, because it takes my digestive fire and just kills it. And then as a result, I get very fatigued and I can't be producing like I produce each week and what I do in writing. I'm finishing my next book. So that's what it's all about.
Wow, yeah, that's very detailed lab work indeed.
Well, it is. So you were right. Just do the journal. You know, the couple of things that make us a scientist, the characteristics are self-inquiry, learning about yourself. And that's you have to have curiosity and awareness for that. And then you have to have strong observational skills. Again, that's our awareness. So we really need to observe what is taking place. We have to be open-minded about it instead of, no, I don't want to do that. This is good. This is bad. No, explore. Let's see what does good and bad really mean. You have to have the intention, the persistence to follow through, because many times obstacles do come in the way and you have to say, no, I'm going to get up and I'm going to do this. And that's where courage comes in. We have to have that feeling of, I can do this. It's called sankalpa. I can do it, will do it, and want to do it. And we have to have that courage to do it, to face ourselves. That's where the real courage comes in, facing ourselves. So to have a successful life, you really need to be able to face yourself.
Wow. Yeah, that's profound. So, in the podcast, you mentioned the six key characteristics of the scientist. So, maybe we could just spend a few seconds on each of them, starting with the self inquiry, which you already mentioned.
Yeah, self-inquiry, it's that constant, that's what we're teaching. That's what people talk about when we're talking, when some people use the word mindfulness. We're talking about our inner awareness and, who am I? And it was a great sage, Maharishi, Ramana Maharishi, who even wrote books on who am I, that once we go to that, that's that always going back to who are we? Are we the breath? Are we the senses? Are we the body? Are we the mind? No, we're that. And again, this is not an intellectual observation that comes. It comes through meditation and working with yourself. You start to feel different. Who am I? Well, no, no. And I'm not the person who's the mind chatter. I'm not that voice. I'm actually the observer of the voice. And that's self-inquiry. Like, why did I do that? Why did I decide to say that? That's that self-inquiry. And it does stem from curiosity. We're really interested, we're interested in finding more out about ourselves. Because a good scientist has insatiate, they never get satiated with learning about things. That
Right.
curiosity continues and can take a 2-year-old who's always saying why. I'm an adult and I still say, well, why are we doing it this way? That's curiosity, and that's where this all starts from.
I definitely love curiosity. One of the books I read early on, Da Vinci and Principles, and that's one of them.
Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's the ultimate artist, scientist, and curiosity is definitely one of those values that you want to have. One thing you mentioned in the podcast was which really resonated with me, discovering the unreality of I thought. I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Not just discovering reality, but discovering the unreality of the I thought.
Well, because when we talk about ego and that this is me, it's really a separation from what really is. How many times in the grossest form have we made a mistake saying, "Oh, I'm this or I'm that." You're not any of that. The I thought I'm talking about here is I'm a teacher, I'm a wife, I'm a husband, I'm this, I'm that. Are we really that, or are they just roles that we play? That's what I mean by I thought. They're the roles we play, but ultimately we're a light being inhabiting a body. And that could sound, those that are in the community that are new, that might sound a little far-fetched, but those that have known me, I'm very practical. But really, who are we? Are we really that who we think we are? Or are we something more than that? And that's where that came from. And that's where the awareness comes. That was the second thing that I believe I put, if I remember correctly, on the list, the awareness. We have to really observe. When we say I'm a teacher, I practice, my profession is teaching, but am I a teacher? No, I'm a light being. When I say light being, meaning I'm pure consciousness that's dwelling in a body. There's consciousness and energy. And so that energy takes on different forms. And that's where we start to work with that pranic field. And that's what this whole, I don't want to get too detailed on this, but the consciousness and energy gives us that experience that we have and that realization in life. And we have to have that awareness to that, being a keen observer and paying attention. That's why all our classes start with really breath training.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, looking at the characteristics that you listed, and I was going to ask you about awareness. So, for myself, awareness to me is the first one, but I don't even think about self inquiry. I naturally have the curiosity, so I wasn't thinking about it.
Right.
But seeing on the list, I've always believed that, awareness for me, in my family, I call it the prime directive. If you don't have awareness, what's the point of anything? Because you don't really know reality, you know unreality, as you put it. So awareness is the key characteristics that I have in the values. Because without that, what do you know? Um,
Well, and also to have that, I have a list, but you also need all of these. They all come together, not one or the other.
right.
Having the open-mindedness, free of bias, that's a scientist. We want to see what the experiment produces in the laboratory or the laboratory. I have a habit of saying laboratory. I'll try laboratory. What the scientist sees. And we have to be open-minded and let come forward whatever it is. But many times we have these judgments. This is good, the best judgment, or I say the best, the most frequent judgment is this is good, this is bad. This is not right. This is not, right or wrong. And so great scientists are very objective, and if we enter any interaction in our day-to-day living with a prejudice, we've already ruined the experiment. And
Gotcha.
that's what the world is coming to now. We're realizing that all are equal and everyone deserves equality, and we must all live together on this globe rotating at a very fast speed, and that's without prejudice. Because prejudice and all of those things, when we have these biases, we really are not living a life of full freedom and fulfillment. We're not. We restrict ourselves.
Right. Yeah. So I guess I see all six of these things that you listed in kind of a Venn diagram where they're all interrelated and working together as one.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, the purpose we all have to live. I think it was Lynn that when we were talking one night, you and I and Lynn, and live on purpose. In other words, purpose and intention is really what it's about. It's if we don't have. You ever have people? I know I've seen it where, well, I don't really know what I want to do. Well, then don't do anything. Just sit there. Have purpose and intention with everything that you create in your life. That's the way we achieve world peace. That purpose and intention. Our intentions, whether we say anything or not, send vibrations out into the world. And if we're trained, we could have, that's where the persistency came in. That even if we get an obstacle that comes in our way, we say what's next. I was talking to a friend yesterday, and we were talking, and I was explaining to her that, there are certain people that we talk to that say, oh, you could never do this. I remember someone saying, oh, Susan, you're too old to be on podcasts. Remember when I told you you're too old to be on
Right. Yeah.
YouTube?
No, no, no.
And I'm developing maybe a class out of that, because it's very powerful when someone tells you you're too old, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough. And that's out there. I mean, negativity is out there because someone is projecting their own negativity and insecurity. And my new sentence is, I'm persistent. I always have been, and you've known me for many, many decades now. And the whole idea is the new word I'm going to use is next. What's next? Just take that step forward. What's next? Because that's going to come. And I think I might have said this at one of our commentaries, but I don't remember, and I'll repeat it just in case. Whatever force of change that you're putting out in the world of positive change, equal and opposing forces are going to hit you the other way. It's a law of nature. It's a scientific experiment. Wherever you have a certain momentum, you're going to have a momentum that comes a force the other way. And then you really need to have more persistence. And you have to have, that's the last one I spoke about, courage. You have to have the courage to say, I can do it, will do it, and want to do it. And I am going to do it. Next. So when someone says anything take away from this today is to have a successful life, don't let anything get in your way. Just say next. Anything that says you can't do it, even if it's a spouse that says you're going to do what? Next. I just like that word next, because she said that. And she said, Susan, you should be writing your next book on that. Next.
Next.
Take the next step forward.
Yeah, I like it.
Just do it. Don't let anything get in your successful thoughts that you have. And that's the secret, right? That's the secret of a yoga scientist. You're conducting the experiment. Nobody's conducting your experiment. Is it really helpful if someone says, or you get an outside force that says, no, you really can't do it? Is that helpful? Or is it helpful to say, let me experiment and see? That inquiring mind is one of the greatest gifts you can have in this life.
Wow.
A mind that's not limited to its little box, its littleness, its walls of prejudice, of right and wrong and good, but a mind that has the capacity to expand and shine so brightly that others just want to bathe and walk in your light. That's really what life's about. How we can provide that for all of humanity and nature. When I talk about humanity, I also talk about nature, because animals are not we have to have respect for animals also. And they're living beings with minds also. Different mindset because they don't have the same functionality that we do with the brain, but they are also, everything is a living being. And living beings all need respect, from the plants to the water to the earth to the air. Everything needs the respect. And that respect comes from having that intention with purity and just really being able to understand from a scientific methodology that everything in this universe is all one. It's not separated out. And that's an experiment in and of itself.
I love it. So the secrets of a yoga scientist, I love those characteristics, brings us, I think, to the takeaway of your podcast, which is really a call to action, that all individuals have the responsibility to enlighten themselves.
Yeah, I've always said that. You have to light, my teacher used to say, you have to light your own lamp. No one's going to do it for you. I remember being younger thinking, oh, well, my teacher, wow, it works for them. They know how to do the meditation, so it really works. Do it for me. And no, it's not really about that. You get kicked in the butt and say, go out and do it yourself because it's you, it's your responsibility. We've been given the privilege of a life. It's our responsibility to enlighten ourselves. And it's really about discipline. Discipline is not a prison, as I say. It just simply means practice. Conduct your experiment, practice, and have fun. There's no mistakes ever, only opportunities to grow and learn some more.